Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast for Australia. All right, we're going to start off by just taking a look at the kind of disparity in the range of precipitation that we've seen here so far in this April and May timeframe across Australia. And I want to begin first with a satellite-based measurement of root zone soil moisture. You've seen me show it many times, but it's the newest GRACE data. And what I'm really seeing here is that we've had pockets of drought developing in Western Australia, but a deep and kind of long-standing drought that started here in parts of South Australia, got into Victoria, and pockets of New South Wales. Also, Tasmania's been very dry, while the farther to the east you go along the coast and then up into Queensland, things have been considerably wet. I mean, very, very wet. It's showing up well on our drought monitor data. This is just looking at the last month, so this would be April's drought monitor. And if I show you the 3-month kind of overall look, we can see just how dry we've been in this area. And this has been a long-standing problem that started to get its way over into this area in here, of course, which is in between these two major river basins that is incredibly productive. So we're having this regional drought issue that we need to have a discussion about. But again, it's the disparity, the range in precipitation that needs to be discussed because there's been flooding along the coast. So with all that said, let's go in and have just a quick look at a value called NDVI. You're very familiar with it. It's the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. It's a satellite-based view of plant health. And I've masked Australia for where we have crops. So you can just see these regions. Now, if I click on Western Australia and you see the data load, we know that this is the time of year where our NDVI values start to increase, okay? But we've just come out of, their lowest points. This year, compared to last year and compared to the average, which is the black line, well, we're well above where we were a year ago, but still not quite in the top half of the distribution. Now, over the coming weeks, we need to have a discussion about precipitation in the West. And yes, there is moisture coming through the West that we need to have a good look at here in a few moments. But that drought area in South Australia is really showing up on the NDVI data. It's some of the lowest we've seen since 2001, certainly lower than a year ago, and well off the historic averages. The drought area gets over into parts of Victoria, so you're going to see here as well, it is the lowest we've seen since 2001 and well below where we were a year ago and historic averages. But as you go up the coast, I grab more of New South Wales, which has more of the wetter conditions that have been here versus here. We're sitting on average. We're behind where we were a year ago. This is where the NDVI values were last year at this time. And then, of course, as I finish in Queensland, looking just at the farmland, we've had very high NDVI values simply because of just how much rain has fallen in this area. It's very green. The crops, everything look pretty healthy in this area. All right, we do all of that just to gain perspective on this. And what I want to show you is this April precipitation anomaly graphic, because what it really reveals to me is that we had at times better moisture in parts of Western Australia. But from Adelaide straight down into Victoria and right in through here. This is like the Murray River Basin. There's several other rivers. I need to learn my geography better about your area that are in this region. And it's just been very dry. While as along the coast and here farther to the north, we've seen just exceptional precipitation. Now, this was in April, but I want to show you something that happened between April and May. So take a look at this. When you go back and look at all of April, April was dominated by a large area of high pressure that sat here, okay? And a deep low that was between Eastern Australia and New Zealand. And this deep low, with just its flow coming around like this, gave us an anomalous wind field that looks something like this. Can you see it now? So there's your flow going around the big high, and here is the flow right there going around that low. Now what's interesting is if you look at the shape of the coast and understand where we have our higher elevation, the flow is actually perpendicular into that elevation, creating a rain shadow effect here. And that rain shadow effect fell right on that part of New South Wales. It was enhanced in parts of Victoria and over toward Adelaide. These are the anomalous winds in the low levels of the atmosphere that produced this drought scenario that we saw developing in April. And the mountains made it worse. Okay, so if you look at a topographical map of Australia, you can see, of course, you all know this, but that's where your mountains are. So if you bring in flow like this, it's got to go over the top of those mountains. We squeeze out all the moisture here on their eastern side. On the western side, we have a downslope wind that is adiabatically drying and warming, and as a result, we're just pushing that across this very productive part of New South Wales and Victoria. Meanwhile, farther to the north, there was just better flow, right? Just better flow overall. Now, if we look at what happened in May, this is amazing. We had the opposite. Now a large area of high pressure built into this region, but it's the exact position of that high that determine the wind direction. And here you can see it. See, if the high is living right in through there, we'd had much stronger winds to the south and much stronger winds in the north. And guess what? They came in and hit the higher elevation once again, creating a rain shadow in the same spots. But this is the one that just pushed a tremendous amount of moisture into the coastal regions. And I know you're all very well aware of the flooding that's been going on there. But we have some places so far in the month of May that are up to 400 millimeters above the historical averages in terms of precipitation, while Victoria slipped farther into drought. Parts of Western Australia got drier. In and around Adelaide, rainfall has been very difficult to come by. And there have been a few surges of moisture in the north that have come out of the tropics. But overall, that's been the scenario. So the question we have to ask is, over the next 15 days, the next 30, next 60 days, are these pressure patterns going to get as stuck as they were in April and May? Now, good news is right now, it looks something like this. And doesn't look at all like we've been. We've actually got a much more open and flowing pattern that is worth discussing here. And this is the way the wind field looks now. In fact, a front's just here off West Australia. We have another front that's way up here in Queensland. And as a result of that, we've got some flow. So I'm just going to show you some radar data. That's across the U.S. Let's take you down here, though, to Australia. This is a new product I'm working on for you. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom in easily here. And let's go ahead and put this in motion just to kind of see where some of this rainfall is. So we can take a good look right here at some of the showers coming through. If we slide over here to Western Australia, there it is again. We have some moisture that's trying to get in to these key areas. Let's let those tiles reload here. There they go. And they're kind of coming right into here with better chances of seeing some near-term rainfall. Sorry, it's a little choppy. My internet connection's a bit slow today. But you can see what I can see here. And this wind field is different. And that's overall good. So the question then becomes, over the next 15 days, do the pressure patterns stay open and moving? In other words, do we follow high pressure with low pressure and so on? Or are we looking at something that's stuck again? So this is the European model. We're going to watch for the pressure patterns compared to average. And we're just going to play it over the next 15 days. Ready? So starting this off here on Wednesday, the 28th, going into the 29th, the 30th. What I love about this is it is open and moving. Now, this is not a drought cure. You're going to see the precipitation totals in a moment. There are still places where we need multiple weeks of this to bring in better moisture to stop kind of our drought problems. But overall, I mean, look, if I just go back and forth, do you see what I see? There is movement in the pressure pattern across Australia. And over the next 10 to 15 days, that movement is what's going to be critical to trying to return better moisture overall. So let's get in and have a look at it. This is the latest update from the European model, and I want you to see a couple of things. We have some showers moving through here. This was what we just saw a moment ago on radar, right? So we saw this and we saw this. So this is good. Good model initialization. As we play it through the rest of the day on Thursday, much more widely scattered rain that's over this part of Queensland and here in Western Australia. High pressure dominates just south of Adelaide. As we then get into Friday and Saturday, we see the high pressure sliding off into the southeast. But watch what happens early next week. On June 2nd, towards June 3rd, a deep low takes form just off of the Western Australia coast. And it's deep and it's north. Look how far north it is. So this front's going to be coming through, wrapping into this, bringing in meaningful lift in the atmosphere and therefore rain. And at the same time, around this area of high pressure sitting here, we have actually got better chances of getting some moisture into parts of coastal New South Wales, which has been flooding, but also possibly into the interior. You say, well, why? Well, it's kind of skirting. The flow is skirting the mountains, and that's what's critical. So when is this again? This is next Monday, this upcoming Monday night, playing into Tuesday next week and Wednesday. Okay, that low takes off towards New Zealand, but look at the depth of this low. And I'll be honest with you, expect strong winds with this as it comes through. That is again next Wednesday towards Thursday and Friday. And we're going to see if this low pressure system can actually deliver on bringing in some needed moisture into this region. It took something big to break it, but that's how all drought is. Drought will beget drought until you have something overpowering to knock it out. And I have a little bit of enthusiasm in my voice because, I don't know, you see something like this and you kind of put a little prayer out there to hope that something like that does in fact come through. I want to switch this up real quick. I'm just going to type it in rather than clicking around. But if we go to the GFS, I can show you one other thing here, because I like the way I've mapped out the winds in this particular case. So if we just have a look at how strong these winds are going to be, playing it forward, there comes that low. Look at this thing. There it is. That's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Very strong winds associated with that low coming in here on the shore. There it is. And sliding across the south. So overall, yeah, I kind of like where this is going. If we go back to the European model, which is here, let's go ahead and just add up precipitation, because I do trust this model more on its precipitation totals. That's getting through Friday into Saturday. There we go. That's first front. There's our scattered rain along the coast of Queensland here. Then here it is Monday. Watch the west. Monday, Tuesday. We're going to watch for coastal showers here. Frontal boundary hitting parts of Western Australia there. And then the front comes through, and we start to see better chances of moisture getting into, well, in and around Adelaide and surrounding agricultural fields. Now, it's not, again, this isn't drought breaking. And if I'm in Victoria and these drier parts of New South Wales, I'm going, Eric, what are you talking about? I don't see a lot. But what I want to try to make a point here of is that the pattern is attempting to deliver some moisture. So now look at what you got. This is a 10-day forecast of total precip. And what is important to me is this. Now, unfortunately, this region continues to show up on the drier side of average, but at least there's something moving in the pattern that's going to give us a better indication of having more moisture get into the region. Now, if we stretch it out there a bit farther, this is the week 2 forecast. I'm sorry, that's the next 7 days. This is the week 2 forecast. And as that broader frontal boundary starts to slide through here next week about right now, we do see chances of being above average on precip. Now understand, I'm talking 1 to 5 millimeters above average. But at least I'm not showing you into that June 5th to June 11th time frame continuation of bone dry conditions. And remember, this is drier, but that's after the front has come through and brought in that moisture. Since we're here, let's go and look at temperature anomalies. There's the next 5 days according to the European model. This is day 5 through 10. And this is out there day 10 through 15, the cool down behind that broader front that's expected to come through. Now, we're going to cover that quickly because I want to get back into this bigger picture idea of what needs to happen as we get into June, July, and August in order to revive these drought regions and get them away from drought. I mean, that's really what the discussion needs to be. So we need to look at a longer term model. We're going to stretch this out with the European extended. And this is a 1 week sliding window of pressure anomalies. So you know that one. That's the one I just told you that's coming through in the first week of June. And then behind it, there's the high. That's what makes Western Australia drier afterward and brings in some cooler conditions. All right, after that, I see that high pressure by the time we get to mid-June settles in over the south and east. Now, I don't think it'll be exactly in this configuration because the models never get that. But I'm mostly interested in the depth of this. There's a deep low, that's right here. And deep lows in this area tend to increase jet stream level winds. And the increase in the jet stream level winds tends to be a key signature in getting more frequent storm systems to cross Australia. And toward the end of June, getting into July, wow, the models still hang on to a sizable area of higher pressure here. We're going to start to ask questions if it can actually return some better moisture. So let's go ahead and have a look at it. This would be June 2nd to July 2nd. As it stands, okay, we still see the drier risks in this area. That's because there's this anchor of high pressure that seems to be stuck in the models here. But if those stronger jet stream level winds, let me see if I can show them to you here. Let's look at, I can't with this model. I apologize. Let's go ahead and look at upper level heights though. If I were to show you the depth of this trough and the spacing of these isobars, what you end up getting is just some stronger winds streaking through this area. That would be a part of the southern annular mode. Now keep that in the back of your head for a moment. Thinking bigger picture, we know that we are in INSO-neutral conditions, and we do not expect, as we go through the next 6 months here, all right, for us to break off into El Nino or back into La Nina. The best outlook I can give you right now is that we'll likely do something like this over the coming months. That gets us all the way to October, November, though. So we're not going to be looking to historical correlations with El Nino and La Nina, nor will we be looking at the Indian Ocean for information as well. And the reason I'm saying that is because, yes, here's kind of the last bit of this La Nina that we had for several months, still flailing. But I'm going to tell you something. There's not enough strong wind with this, not enough strong trade wind with this to drive our weather patterns. And the Western Pacific warm pool is warm, but it's not so anomalously warm that it's holding the MJO hostage. And so the MJO is going to be on the move. And in the Indian Ocean, you can see this cooler water, but there's expected to be over the next 15 days very strong winds creating this upwelling that's going to go into India. That's going to be a part of an early onset of the Indian monsoon, but it's not yet having a massive effect, in my opinion, on the Indian Ocean dipole. So you say, all right, all of that meteorological word salad you just served me, what in the world do I do with that? What we do with it is this. We think that the shifting around across the Indian and Pacific Ocean will be fast. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that this area of subsidence will quickly pass over the next 15 days from the Indian Ocean all the way here to Indonesia. And there's going to be some much higher probability of rising motion all the way over by parts of South America. Now you're going, okay. What typically happens after that is a complete reset. It tends to just jump back to a pattern that it's been familiar with. And I bring all of that up to kind of share with you that once we get later in the month of June and start to creep into July, after seeing so many weeks of higher pressure here, the forecast models are attempting to drop the pressure again in this area. And as a result, the July precipitation outlook, if we just look at the monthly, is actually wetter than average. And I can make a story for this. This makes sense to me to see that kind of behavior. And it's not just, July as we get into it. Just so you know, let's blow that up so you can see it. This is the June, July, August outlook that was just released by the the National Multi-Model Ensemble, just another suite of models we use. And see, it's giving better chances as we go toward these June, July, August months of above normal precipitation. Not attributable to La Nina, not attributable to, I think, really what's going on in the Ocean. I think what's happening here is that the atmosphere is preferring to give a lot of rising motion here, while the extratropical jet stream winds start to meander a bit farther to the north and come across Australia a bit stronger. Now, it's also echoed in the new update from BOM. This is their June through August outlook. And what's interesting is they've got better chances of reviving moisture in through this area. They're still a bit drier down here in parts of Victoria, and they're a bit drier in terms of the risk near Perth. But overall, I can't disagree with this upcoming forecast, nor can I really disagree with their July to September outlook, given what I just explained. Now, I've been thinking all of this through and trying to make sure that I understand, though, that the risks of having drought leading to more drought are a very real thing. That is a lesson I had to teach myself time and time again throughout school to make sure that I get it. Because the new prototype outlook from the Northern Australia Drought Monitor Group, they continue to show drought persisting and maybe even worsening in a few places here May to July. So I understand that that's a different look. So I got curious specifically about this region, and I went out and I created this. For that box right into there, I went and I looked at historically what were the wettest and driest June, July, and Augusts on record. So you can see your dry ones are down here, your wet ones are on top. And I made some composite maps to help me understand what would need to occur. So if it's June through August, this is the top thing that you want to watch if you want to see above average precipitation. I got some of those years listed right here. We need to take that deeper trough of low pressure, this guy right here, the one I mentioned. You can also see it in the pressure pattern. There it is right there. And this has got to creep farther to the north, okay? Because if it does, historically, we tend to get a much more active frontal passage setup across this part of Australia. And we tend to get wetter. And that tends to break the drought cycle. But it takes much deeper low pressure coming up from the south to get into this area. When that occurs, guess what happens? Your jet stream level winds, which are shown here, June through August, are much stronger than average. And yes, this is all related to the southern annular mode. But the southern annular mode is not just a yes or no type thing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If you go look at Baum's great diagrams here, I love these, that just kind of show the typical effects of a positive southern annular mode in winter versus a negative southern annular mode in winter. What we tend to see is one part of Australia is kind of sacrificed for another. So if it's positive, right, you can see what I can see. We tend to be drier where we've already had drought. And guess what? We've had a positive southern annular mode for most of the end of March, most of April, and a big chunk of May. And that's why we've been wetter farther to the north and drier here. But if we get into that negative phase and those jet stream level winds move north, we tend to cure drought issues here and then create them a bit farther to the north. I can show it to you another way. If you go back and just reconstruct historically June through August, the correlation between the southern annular mode, which again is just jet stream level winds and the pressure patterns, there seems to be a dividing line right there. And you can see that at the sacrifice of what happens from Adelaide to Victoria, you get New South Wales up to Queensland wet. Western Australia tends to be the opposite of Eastern Australia. I mean, it's a very interesting thing to watch the behavior of those jet stream level winds. It doesn't seem possible that everyone gets what they need based upon this analysis. And you say, well, why? Because your continent is huge. And that's ultimately the story here. So with all that being said, I want to remind you of something. There's a website. I link it every time I send out the report. Because of the uncertainty, please go to agweather.com and look at all of the data that I've got. You can look at any model you want and watch the week-to-week variability. But I'm going to recommend you watch this one most carefully. It's those pressure anomalies that we have to keep a close eye on. And we need more of these deep lows born on more northerly jet stream winds that then go across Western Australia and swipe through South Australia and eventually get to Victoria and New South Wales like you just saw there. And that kind of pattern needs to be reinforced. We need to see more of that occurring over the coming weeks and months in order to break this drought cycle in those key growing areas. All right, that's the main thing I wanted to address here. So what else is happening? Well, let me tell you about where I am. It's supposed to be spring, almost summer, and we just had one of our coldest weekends. We're about 250 GDDs behind average on our corn, soybean crop, and all the crops are grown in the Northeast, while the southern part of the United States is baking. But our bigger issue is this. We have flooded out a large part of our cotton belt, rice, corn, soybeans here. Our southeast, which grows a lot of peanuts, cotton, corn, soybeans, all sorts of crops, has been extremely wet. We've had some drought problems right in the year. This is a precipitation departure map when you look at it in terms of inches. And what's interesting about our whole pattern is that as we go forward, we're still staying pretty cool. We need more heat. It's not coming. All of our heat's going into the western U.S. We also have a lot of heat in and around the Black Sea and western Russia. India's cooler. Why? Because we're having a strong wind coming in from this direction. And you've already seen the discussion on Australia, but I want to show you the global precip outlook for the next 10 days. So what's interesting is that wind blowing across this part of India is relatively dry. So it's not the early onset of the monsoon, but take a look around this part of Europe and Russia. Better rains overall in the forecast. We've had a very interesting go of it in China. There has been on and off precipitation patterns that have hit some of their key growing areas. But where they grow a lot of cotton, here, doing okay. We see that the Manchurian Plain, North China Plain doing all right as well. And again, the map we're looking at here is just the next 10 days. So with all of that, I want to leave you off here and tell you we've got plenty of things to watch. But the most critical piece for us to be watching together are these pressure patterns that are extending across our south. And again, if we can see a pattern, I'm going backward in time here, watch it again. If we see this pattern continue to stay open and moving, and we can get more deep lows like the one coming early next week that's going into Western Australia, the better we will be at kind of pushing away some of this longer term drought risk. That's the top thing to watch. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.